Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you're joining from. I am Tanvi, your host for today, and we have two very special guests, Mauktik and Ankita, with us. Um, Hope you're taking care of all of yourself, English. and Thank you for joining this. It's a very, very special live. I was so stoked for this because talking to Mauktik, I've been following his journey last couple of years, and when I found out about Ankita, I was so excited. I am just very happy to be here. So a little background on this live. Mauktik and Ankita both come from engineering backgrounds, and they had an epiphany of sorts, which sort of made them take a different direction in their lives, and they've been traveling ever since. And I think it's unconventional, not because traveling isn't a thing, but because they were courageous enough to take this up and work on their dreams and be like, okay, I'm going to travel now, which is why it's such a special thing to have you both here. Um, so as me, like as someone who wants to travel in the future, who looks forward to explore a lot, their journeys have been massively inspiring. And I've known Ankita for like only 24 hours now, but it's crazy how amazing her story is. It's fascinating. So I'm going to hand this over to Moktik now so he can introduce himself and tell us more about how he got into traveling as a career, sort of. You want to take it over?
All right, you guys can hear me, right? So thanks for the introduction. I actually want to go first because I want to set the stage for Ankita's introduction. I've had my share of thrills and adventures, but they're nothing compared to what Ankita has experienced. So this would be a nice progression. As some of you know, I grew up in a small town in Maharashtra called Jalgaon. It's in northern Maharashtra, and studied there till my 10th. Came to Pune for engineering. So I was part of the half of India that was doing engineering, and I guess the rest were doing medicine. And if you were studying engineering in the 90s and 2000s, I think GRE was the holy grail. So I did that, moved to the US, started studying neuroscience. And that's when I think I took a wrong turn. I was introduced to backpacking by accident, actually. I planned a trip to Mexico with a friend, and we forgot the itinerary at the last minute. So we didn't speak any Spanish. We didn't have a plan, and we had about 2 weeks to spend in Mexico. It was a pretty short trip. It was just a Christmas break. But on that trip, I met some interesting people who were traveling without a plan, or even living their whole lives without a plan. I came back from the trip thinking that this is stupidity. I'll never be able to do anything like that. So I just went back to studying neuroscience. But when I was studying neuroscience, I watched this movie called The Motorcycle Diaries. Some of you might have watched the movie, or some of you might have heard about Che Guevara, the Argentinian communist revolutionary who fought alongside Fidel Castro for the Cuban Revolution. Or if you haven't heard of any of these things, maybe you've just seen him as a guy who doesn't shave or doesn't shower and is on every t-shirt in mud. So the Motorcycle Diaries was actually about his early years. He was tired of studying medicine and decided to travel all around South America looking for inspiration. And after traveling for about a year and a half, he became a communist revolutionary. I didn't care much about communism. I still don't. But I watched the movie and I was so enamored by the natural beauty of South America that I felt like I should do a bike trip like that. And the day I got my first job offer, that's exactly what I did. I postponed my joining date by a couple of months and took off. So let's put up this map. I'm going to share my screen and then I'll just show you how that first big trip actually happened. Let's see, can I share my screen here? Tanvi, you'll have to make me the host.
I think all participants can share their screens now.
I can't.
As I change my settings.
And you're not, you cannot change the settings anymore?
Wait, let me see. Oh, yes, you can share it now.
Okay, I can share now?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So, as I said, I took off. I landed in Cusco in Peru. Assuming all of you can see this. Now, my original plan, which was really a lack of any planning, was to start from Cusco, pick up a motorcycle, go all the way down to Ushuaia, the southern tip of South America, come back up to Buenos Aires, and trace my way back to Cusco. But I didn't know the language. I didn't know anything about the people, the culture, the landscapes. So what I ended up doing was actually this. Instead of doing some 12,000 kilometers, I managed to start from Cusco, go down to La Serena, then Cordoba in Argentina, and back to Chile, and back up to Peru. And we'll talk a little bit about why that happened and some of the stories later. But I came back from this trip. I had already met a lot of crazy people. I'd met some teenagers or college students who just finished, their 12th or their, engineering and decided to travel indefinitely. I'd met a lot of adults who would, just quit their jobs and decided to travel. I actually came back thinking that I would never be able to do that. So I had a job offer. I joined that startup thinking that this is not for me. And sure enough, after 4 years of working in that startup, I sold off everything I had in the US and embarked on a much bigger trip. So I decided to travel for a year. This was my second big trip. And as you can see, I started from the US, covered almost all the continents. It was about 36 countries in a year. And then came back to the US, packed up everything and moved to India. When I was on this trip, I was a little worried that I would probably get bored. I wouldn't be able to travel for a year. So I had this interesting project going on. I had 4 questions in mind, and every country that I would visit, I would find one person who spoke a little bit of English, and I would ask the same 4 questions to people around the world, and I would do these short, 4-5 minute videos of them answering the questions. When I finished the trip and moved back to India, I thought that I would just hand it over to somebody in the film world. They would do some editing, put it up on YouTube, and it would be a nice little hobby project. Now, the person that I met through my friends happened to be a national award-winning director. His name is Brahmanand Singh. When he looked at all my videos, he actually laughed. That was his first reaction. Because, some of the angles were weird, lighting was not right, some of the people were directly looking into the camera. I was an amateur. I didn't know how to make films. So he looked at all of that and he said, there's nothing I can do with these videos. But when I started telling him stories about my bike trip and my around the world trip, he got quite excited about it. And he said that if you're willing to travel like this in India, I can see a movie coming out of it. So he was willing to lend his name to the project. And it was my job to now run around and raise the money and make things happen. So that's how the third big trip came about. And this is the map. So this was completely in India. And our idea was to capture the social, economic, cultural contradictions of India. Obviously, I had, a desire to share my, experiences of backpacking and share the joys of backpacking. So that was my hidden motive. But this is what we ended up doing in India. So this was another 7,000-8,000 kilometers, started from Mumbai all the way to Shillong in Meghalaya, to Fema in Nagaland, and then back to Mumbai through Rajasthan. And that was the third big trip, which ended up being a film, something that I'd never imagined in my life. Now, let's dig a little bit deeper into each one of these. So I'm going to tell you maybe 1 or 2 stories from each of these trips and then hand it over to Ankita. So my first day on the road in South America was actually quite ironic because I had these ideas of traveling 500-600 kilometers a day, and that's the reason why I had that huge plan of covering half of the continent. But the first day I was on the road, these were summer days, so sunlight was available till 8:39 in the night. I think it was around 7:30 when I took a wrong turn. These were the days when we didn't have iPhones. There were no maps. I was following a tiny little thing called a booklet called Lonely Planet. It's a guide for backpackers, and it has these small maps of every place that you go to. So I was following that. Took a wrong turn around 7:30 in the evening, and the road turned into kacha road. It was not a paved road anymore, gravel road. And I thought maybe there is some construction going on. I'll keep going, and the road will get better. Now around 8:30, it was already getting a little dark. The road was still not a paved road; it was still gravel road. And I came across a tiny little stream. This was a 400cc motorcycle. I had my luggage with me, so I used the brakes, and the motorcycle fell down. Now imagine this is 13,000-14,000 feet high up in the Andes. It's already getting a little cold. There is absolutely nothing in sight. It is pitch dark. And I couldn't even lift my motorcycle. I had all the luggage on the motorcycle as well. So even lifting it on my own wasn't an option. After a while, I thought, I'll just pitch my tent there and I'll spend the night there before I, get out of that situation. But luckily, after waiting for 5 minutes or so, one car came from the other side. And I think we need to mute someone. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So luckily, one car came from the other side. I waved them. I asked them to stop. I asked them to help me. So the first thing they did was obviously pick up my motorcycle, and then we tried to communicate, but I couldn't say a word. I mean, I couldn't understand what they were saying, and they couldn't understand what I was saying. All I wanted to do was to get to a place called Takana, and I think that's the only thing they understood. Out of everything that I was saying, Takna, the name of that town, is something that they realized, oh, this guy's trying to get there. And then they started laughing. That was my first cue that I'm in trouble. So they gave me two options. This is a lot of hand waving that I'm doing, but it was essentially body language and hand gestures that I was using. So they told me that I can turn around, go with them and get to the main road, spend the night there and then start again, or keep going. There's a tiny little village about half an hour away from there. And I had these grand plans of going all the way to the southern tip. So I said, I'm not turning around, I'll keep going. So I ended up in this small little village, which was less than 50 people. I think we need to mute. Yeah. Yeah. So this was a tiny little village of less than 50 people. I found one couple that was walking along that main drag. They kept pointing to one concrete structure. In fact, the only concrete structure in the entire village. And then I went there. This was what it was. It was the only place where there was some electricity. There was a tiny little bulb outside. I went in. I told them. I, basically started pleading that I just need to spend one night. I need to find some food. And there was only one guy among them who could speak a few words in English. And he said, no problema, no problema, we'll take care of you. They took my bike inside and they ushered me into this room. So this was my first night on the road. You can see there's an oxygen cylinder. There is some charts there. The couple that I had met on the road, they bought those two blankets for me. So I spent my first night in this primary healthcare center. And when I asked for food, they said, we really don't have a whole lot of food. But the two things that they gave me were this piece of bread that you see and this cup of tea. And then I had some power bars with me. I had some Gatorade powder and water. And This is my first dinner on the road. So there are lots of stories like that. In fact, after coming back to the US, I ended up writing a book about that entire trip, which I'll share with you a little bit later. Before leaving, I thought I would take a picture of these guys. There is again somebody.
Yeah, done.
Yeah. So I took a picture of them, took off, and for about 10 years after that, I had no idea where this village was because I couldn't find it on the map. I couldn't ask anyone, but this was the only reference that I had. And 10 years later, I watched that Dave Patel movie called The Lion, in which he gets adopted, he goes to Australia, and then when he's an adult, he uses Google Earth to trace his roots in India. And I was inspired by that. I thought, hey, I can use Google Earth to trace my way back. And I managed to do that. So based on that tiny little name, Puente Buelo, that you can see there, I managed to trace this place. And this is that exact same building that I spent my first night in. The color is different, but it's the exact same place. And now if you zoom out a little, this is that village. That's it. There's one road and there is about 10-15 houses on either side. That's it. And you zoom out a little bit more, you don't even see that village. So it was kind of nice. After 10 years, I finally managed to figure out where I spent that first night on the road. And this is the book. It's been translated in Marathi. It's also been translated in Spanish now. There's lots of stories like that. Coming to the round the world trip now, these two pictures, I actually call them my $1 million pictures. And I'll tell you later. I'll tell you the story first. I was in Europe. That was my first leg of the round the world trip. And I was in Norway. I was interested in going to this tiny little town called Tromsø, which is beyond the Arctic Circle. So if you go there at the right time, you can see the midnight sun. That's what I was shooting for. It was a short flight, from Oslo to Tromsø. It was supposed to be less than 2 hours. So we hit cruising altitude, and in about half an hour into our flight, all these oxygen masks suddenly dropped. I've done a lot of air travel in my life, and I had never seen oxygen masks drop. And my first reaction was I was completely confused. I'm like, why are the oxygen masks out? And before I could realize it, there were a couple of bumps that we felt, and the flight started nosediving like I'd never experienced before. And there was a row of 6 seats. I was on one end of the seat. There was a girl on the other end of the seat. There was nobody else in the middle. I immediately looked at her. She'd already started crying. I looked outside. I was at that point really looking for some sign that I'm going to die. I mean, I was looking for something like a, fire or, the wing flying off or, some window getting busted. But I couldn't figure out what was going on. The pilot made an announcement in Norwegian, and it was a 1-sentence announcement. They didn't say anything in English, and all I know is this flight is nosediving like I've never seen before. I actually had to use the seat to hold on. I mean, to really be in my seat, I had to hold on to the seat. Luckily enough, after 5 minutes of that nightmare, we came down to about 10,000 feet. So going from 30,000 to 10,000 feet in 5 minutes. And then it stabilized. The pilot wasn't sure whether we were still going to Tromsø or coming back to Oslo. In another 5 minutes, that confusion was over. So they decided to turn around and come back to Oslo. The flight attendants started moving around, started smiling a little, but we still weren't sure what was going on because they were telling us to keep our oxygen masks on and not move. So until we landed, we had no idea that we were going to survive that day. But luckily we landed, came back to Oslo, and then the pilot started telling the entire story. And she said that in the world of flights, this was actually a good problem to have. So apparently there was a leak in one of the air pressure valves, and the air pressure had started leaking. And after the air pressure leaked below a certain point, they had to bring the flight down to 10,000 feet, where the outside pressure is roughly equal to the pressure inside the aircraft, and turn around and come back. But I call these my $1 million pictures because you can't even pay by airlines $1 million to take their oxygen masks out. And that's because there is no way to automatically put those oxygen masks back in. So they actually manually have to put these oxygen masks back in and shut all those doors. So you can't pay airlines to get that kind of a video. You have to be close to dying if you want to have that kind of a picture. But that's what traveling is all about. When I landed in Oslo, I still remember, if I died, I at least died while I was on an around the world trip, following my dream. That's a little depressing. But, we can have a more exciting or intriguing story. So the last country on that trip was Colombia. And some of you might have seen Narcos. You might have heard about this guy Pablo Escobar, who was one of the most notorious cocaine dealers the world has ever seen. I think at the height of his empire, he had some 70, 80 chartered flights, and he was doing this cocaine trade all over the world. Now he's dead, but his brother is still alive. And if you go to Medellin, which was his home, you can actually do something called a Pablo Escobar tour. And it's very eerie. It's very strange because they take you to some of the bombed out buildings. They take you to his grave. And then finally, they take you to the only place that is still in the Escobar family's name, which is a house that his mom owned. So everything else was confiscated. But the house that Pablo's mom owned is still under the Escobar name, and his brother is still alive. And you can go there, you can meet him. He actually poses right next to the poster which the FBI had put out to capture him and his brother. So you see the guy on the right side is actually the guy maybe 20, 30 years later. On the left is Pablo, but on the right is Roberto Escobar. And it's the same guy 20, 30 years later who's standing there. And it's just, so strange to meet this guy that after that entire tour, I asked him, if you want to change one thing in your life, what would you change? And without even taking a minute, he said, I would change my entire life. And that was the end of my trip. And I felt so good about it. I was like, okay, I can at least look back at my life and I can say that, okay, there is nothing that I want to change in my life. And that was a book related to that trip. So I ended up writing another book based on it. And I'll finish with one story from our documentary that we made. So the idea of the documentary was to capture these social, economic contradictions of India. And as a part of that, we went to a town called Azamgarh, which is in UP. It's in eastern UP. And we were chasing a story called Mauktik Sangh. So this is Dead People's Society. This guy that you see on the screen actually does not exist legally. They have managed to rig the entire system so that there are no official government records of this guy being alive, and he's still alive. I'll leave that story for the movie. I think you'll really enjoy watching the movie because it's not just about backpacking, it's about exploring these cultures and attitudes and ways of life. But I wanted to finish with a fun story. So on this particular trip, we had an American girl with us. The idea was that I grew up in India. I understand India to a certain extent. These things, although I find them humorous, they don't surprise me. So we thought it would be interesting to take an American girl to explore these same contradictions and see how she reacts. Now, Azamgarh is an extremely conservative part of India. And there's only one main road on which you have the train station and the bus stop. We found only one semi-decent place where we could spend the night. There was a little bit of a neon sign outside and it looked a little fancier than some of the other ones. So we walk in, me, this girl Samantha, and three other crew members. And immediately, the first thing the receptionist said was, "Oh, who is she? If she's not accompanied with her husband or brother or father, she cannot spend the night here." And we immediately started looking at each other. We were like, "What do we do now?" But luckily, our audio guy was quite street smart, so he made up a story. He told the receptionist, he said, "Look, I was born in India. My parents are both Indian, but my parents got divorced. My dad went to the US. He married an American woman, and they had a child, and this is my stepsister." And when he told that story, then the receptionist was okay. He was like, "Okay, okay, fine. If she is your stepsister, you can, stay the night here." But these are the kinds of stories that only happen when you're willing to travel in an unstructured way, without having a plan and being open to experiences. So this is the film that came out of it. I think I should stop here because I've probably already gone way overboard. So over to you, Ankita.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much, Mauktik, for all the stories and great experiences. Hello, everyone. I am Ankita. And first of all, I would like to apologize because my talk is not going to be as structured as Mauktik's was. And because my travels were never really that much structured. He went out with a plan and how usually people should do. This is what I would suggest everyone do, which I think I initially started off with as well. But as fate would have it, I just digressed. And it has been 4 years now. And I'm still going. And currently, I'm talking to all of you guys from Chile. It's 4 degrees here. I'm freezing to death. And my heater broke. Nothing, could have gone wrong, but now everything is going wrong. But here I am speaking with y'all. Um, so, as I said, I would like to apologize. It's not going to be as perfect. Secondly, I'm really unprepared. I just put all my photos together, so it's not going to be a structured, when you'd see presentations and all, it's not going to be that. And thirdly, I would like to apologize. I shouldn't apologize, but I would still do it. My accent. People might be wondering, she's an Indian and she speaks with a really weird accent of sorts. It's called linguistic code switching, and people who speak multiple languages or who speak, accents or dialects of different languages do this when they address different demographics. So that was all my apologies wrapped together. And so let me start off with my talk, so to say. So I come from a very academically driven, very humble, conservative Indian middle-class family. And I also come from a very small town from Chhattisgarh. It's called Dongargarh. And you'd have a very hard time placing it because it's very small, probably population of less than 1 lakh people in Indian numbers. And I started off like a normal school girl, but my only urge always I had this craving of escape. I have no idea why. I always wanted to, because if there is a land, this magic, if there is a land that exists where they have these kind of lakes, or there's a land that exists where they have mountains, I want to see those mountains. I want to dive into those lakes and see the flora and the fauna and talk to the people and experience the culture and everything else. So after my schooling, I did engineering from Kerala, where I learned a little bit of Malayalam. And I think that was when my adventure first began, because I was a North Indian girl going to a completely new culture, to South India, different food, people, culture, everything else. Then I wanted to change it, and I got the opportunity to do an internship in Germany. So after my college, I went to do a technical internship in Germany, and that's exactly where the first travel bug it bit me. And I remember we were a group of students from all over the world. So we used to, because Europe, if you're familiar with the geography, you'd know that all the countries are so close by that during the weekend you can take a train and you'd be in a different country. You can have a weekend trip to a different country. And yeah, so I traveled a lot, talked to the people. I was always interested in knowing, Vasudev Kutumbakam. We have the saying in India where we call the world as our home, and it should be like that. So everyone should at least try to know or educate themselves about everything else that is out there. So yeah, that is where it bit me. And then I came back to India. I started working with some startups, and the last proper location dependent job that I had was when I was working with the Swiss consulate in India. And that is when I was getting paid enough to have a trip abroad all by myself. And I went to Bali. That was my first ever solo trip. I enjoyed it a lot, and it was 2 weeks of absolute adventure. And that was my proper backpacking trip, because I had a plan. I went from one place to the other, and Ubud, Gili Islands, Gili Meno, Gili Air, Gili Travangan, and so I experienced the culture. It was very, very similar, because there is a lot of impression of Hinduism there in Indonesia. So you would see Ramayana, Mahabharata, all of these things engraved in the walls of those temples when you go there. So you feel, it's a good start because it's still home. And after that, I returned back to India, and I thought everything was going too well. Like, I had a job, I had a boyfriend, I had a house, everything was going too well. Let's mess it up. And that's when I decided to quit my good on paper job, and I sold everything, and I kind of purged. That was the great purge that happened in my life, and I started off. I went home and I told my parents I want to travel, and I want to. So my dad, his first question was, why? Because, okay, you want to travel, I understand that, but who are you going with? Is it a trip with your friends, or is it, because he was not aware of my Bali trip, as one shouldn't really do that, shouldn't tell them, no, kids, don't do that, tell your parents everything. And I took my I kind of told them. I did not took the permission, so to say. I was like, I'm going to be going to Thailand, and because I want to scuba dive and I want to do the open water diving course, and which I came to know about when I was in Bali. And my father was like, no, okay, so how long is that going to take? I said, 1 week. Why are you planning to go for 3 months? Because I want to, and it's my life, and I should be able to. And all those rebellious things you say when you're young. And then I took off. I went to Thailand. I finished my scuba diving. I was a very slow traveler, I think, from the very beginning of my travels. So I took my time in these places, and I would stay in a country until I would finish my visa. So unless my visa is running out, I would not even think about leaving the country. And in Cambodia, I even overstayed my visas and kind of constantly did the border runs, extended my visas, because the country was fascinating, the story, the history, everything. And so after that, I went to Cambodia. I covered a lot of Southeast Asian countries. And I came back. I went to Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Indonesia, all of these countries. And during that time, I was not in touch with my family, because the 3 months became 5, and then 7, and then 9, and it didn't seem to have any end. So coming from a very, conservative academic family, I was thrown off the, so to say, the normal track that people should follow. And then there was an unfortunate event that happened. My grandfather was ill, so I was very close to him. I was the closest to him in the family. So that's when I decided to return back, even though I was not in touch with my family. They completely ostracized me, so to say. And I returned home, but I had the preparation of going back again because I interviewed with a company in Vietnam to teach English there. And I came home, I did my things, and I went back to Vietnam, lived there for a year. Before that, while I was traveling, I lived in Cambodia for 7 months or so. Then after Vietnam, I came to the States. I've lived in the United States for about 3 months, and then in Mexico for 6 months, in Peru for 3 months or so, and now I'm in Chile now I'm stuck here because I cannot leave. Even though my visa expired, I'm overstaying here. So this is an illegal immigrant, so to say, talking to you. Because no, I'm not, on papers I'm illegal, but I've written to the authorities to solve this for me. So hopefully the Indian embassy will take care of this. Yeah, so I think my travels are very different from Mauktik's travels because they were not planned, and it has been very peripatetic. I've been moving a lot around so much, and it was always about living in a place and getting to know the culture and educating myself more than just having the sense of adventure. So I think Mauktik's travels were more like, okay, I want to go on an adventure, I want to do that. And mine were more like, I want to educate myself and I want to be, because I felt like I personally, being in India, coming from such a background, I was not really informed. I was not, I would read things on paper and see things on digital media, but I never had that experience that I wanted to live by myself. So a lot of you who've joined me here on this call, I think also know me from the road, but I would have said hello, given you a hug, or, randomly had a very intense political talk about, I don't know, Marxism or probably Aristotle, or you never know, because I really enjoyed these things a lot. So currently I'm a digital nomad. And those of you who are not familiar with the terminology, even though we don't like to use it, we're a group of people who work location independent. So we work out of our laptops and we just need Wi-Fi, internet, and that's how we earn our living. And that space is booming a lot, if you can say that, because now I think after COVID-19, remote work is going to be the style of working, which majority of us, like my digital nomad fellows, we've been doing for years now. And I'm sure a lot of you will have a lot of questions about that space, because, the first thing that comes to mind is the monetary, the finances. How are we going to work around that when we take on travels for such a long time? When you make it a lifestyle, how do you meander? How do you wander in that area? So I would love to take on those questions, and I would like to keep my talk short and share with you a few stories. So I think scuba diving was one of the most important things that pushed me to travel, and I'm still diving. But my first ever scuba diving adventure was a disaster. And Murphy's Law, anything and everything that can go wrong goes wrong. So for all the men here, just get ready for some women talk. I had my periods while my first scuba diving experience. And if you don't know, women go through a lot of, hormonal changes during those days. We puke, their mood changes. We're always, dizzy. And so I had to have this very uncomfortable conversation with my diving instructor, who was a male, of course. He was an American in Thailand. And he was so uncomfortable, but I had to, because this was a technical thing. And he was extremely uncomfortable, but then he handled it like a pro. He let one of his female instructors talk to me, and she instructed me how should I handle this thing, this and that. And it was extremely awkward because all of my dive mates were also men. So I was the only woman in a group of four people. So you have to have a dive partner, and then you're a group of people who are diving together with your instructor. And every time I would go in to have my first dive, so you would go out there into the ocean and you would take at least 2 to 3 dives, depending on what's the program. And every time I'd come out of the ocean and then, take a break, I would throw up and then suit up again and put my cylinders back on again and then go back in again. And then you come back again and then you throw up again. So it was a complete disaster. But like Mauktik said, I would not change anything. I would keep it this, I would not change anything. Probably make it not, I would not want to have my periods while I would go diving again. But I think you learn from your mistakes. You learn how to move, maneuver yourself. The second story is when for the first time I saw bioluminescence, which is planktons. So this is going to be a story about how you have to let yourself go and lose yourself when you travel. Yes, you have to have a plan, but at the same time, you should be open to adventures that might just come on your way. And so I stayed in a very makeshift hostel. There was just 2 hostels in that particular island that I went to in Cambodia. Just 2 hostels in the entire island that were functioning. And that hostel was owned by this Turkish guy. And initially it looked very shady because there were just 4 beds and, very few people. And then more people signed up. So he kind of arranged more beds in there. And then he was like, he had a supply boat that people used to go to the mainland and, take the food supplies, etc. And he used to use that supply boat to organize tours. That was not really a tour. That was just a makeshift tour because he was familiar with the geography. So he would take you out in a very unexplored, completely new, untouched territory, and he would let you experience that. So one of his tours was the so-called tours, was a plankton tour, and no other tourist agency would go there. Nobody was going there. It was just us, a group of 7 people. And he took us on his supply boat. He had a little assistant, a Cambodian assistant. He was 8 years old. And the 8-year-old boy was navigating the whole boat. So we were just like, okay, if the boat flips and if we're in the water, in water, then we're going to have to come back swimming back to our islands. So we were on this boat and it was night. So it was pitch dark and it was I think, a very, very dark night. So there was no moon. The stars were barely seen when we started off from the islands because there's light sources around. And then when we went out there in the ocean, into the dark, when you see nothing else, we saw some flying fish. So while our boat was going on, the fish would fly out of the water because you're kind of disturbing the tranquility of the sea, of the ocean. It's nighttime. And it's an unexplored, completely untouched territory. So the fish would come out of the water and it was such a surreal experience. After that, we went to an island which was uninhabited. There was nothing there. It was a very tiny land of moss land. That's it. And when we were near that thing, he said, jump. And we were like, what? And he's like, no, just jump. And we were all kind of hesitant at the very beginning. It was like, okay, this is unexplored. There's no one to be seen around. There is not a single light you can see. It's uninhabited. We can barely see each other. It's so dark because there's nothing. And he put off the light that he had. Fortunately, we had life jackets just to make sure that, and in case something happens, we're not going to die. And he's like, no, jump. So one English guy, he did, and he jumped. And we saw the whole trail glow up. So when he jumped into the water, we saw the whole thing glowing up, like it's like a ray of, light. And immediately after hearing that, all of us, we jumped like babies, like 5-year-old kids. And when we jumped into the water, we were just splashing and playing. And we let go and let loose so much so that, and it was an amazing, amazing experience because everything was lit up. It was pitch dark a second ago. And immediately after that, we were into the water and everything was glowing down there. And then he said, look up, because we were so, scared and because of the dark and everything else. When we looked up, we could see the whole Milky Way, the galaxy. So till today, when I remember that experience, my eyes get watery because it was so surreal. It was a second before everything was dark because we were scared, and the moment we let go, everything lit up, and in the most amazing, most awesome, like the most awesome, amazing light. And I don't even have words for that kind of magnificent, marvelous scenery that you see in front of you. So I think this is the lesson that you learn when you let go, when you delve into the adventures. This is how life and nature, so to say, opens up. And I think Cambodia has a very special place in my heart because I was never aware of the history of the country. I mean, it's so close to India; we're practically neighbors. But the thing that went on, the Khmer Rouge, and the atrocities the leader committed over there, killing his own people, I was not aware of it. So that also opened my eyes as to how important it is for me to educate myself in order to know the world and hear the stories directly from the people instead of just reading a book or trying to hear it from the media or films. Or yes, films and books are important because they tell you stories, but then again, they tell you the stories from the maker's perspective. If I write a book, I'm going to tell you what I saw in that country. But if you go to the country, you will see it for yourself. You will witness the history, you will witness the people, you'll hear the stories from their own mouths. So you will see their reality. If you're reading a book, you will see my reality, right? So this is one of the reasons why I urge everyone to please go out there, see it for yourself. Because in Cambodia, a woman that I ended up working for. I was a bartender there, one of the very many jobs that I've had. A girl who never knew how to pour a beer. I enjoyed a beer, but I never knew how to pour a beer. I ended up becoming a bartender because I ran out of money, as you do. And I was also exploring. I had a little bit of money, but I was also exploring this, the adventure. So when you become part of the family, that's when people open up to you. And she shared with me the atrocities her own family had to go through. She was a little girl when this happened, and her father was killed. I think she had 5 brothers. I'm sorry if I'm wrong here, but all of them, they were killed. And it was her mother, and a few of her family members who were left. They had to flee the town they were born and brought up in, go to another village. This woman is still an inspiration for me because she learned English by herself. She opened up a business on the beach where she had a beach shack, a restaurant, and she would laugh and she would party with all the Westerners and all the people who were coming there and backpackers and everyone. But then there was a sense of, I'd say, grief she always had because she was struggling inside all the time. And she was supporting a family of an odd 40 people while she was running that business that looked like it was all happy and merry from the outside. And I can go on and talk about in very many people that I've met like that, especially women, because I think for women, when me and Mauktik, we were having this chat, I mentioned that to him. I said, your stories and your perspective is going to be completely different from mine, because when we wake up, it's a different world for us. Every day, every morning, when a man opens his eyes and a woman opens her eyes and goes out there in the world, it's different. It might not be as different for the Western people, like people who've been born and brought up in the Western societies. And there are still differences, very little differences, but they are still very much visible, very much out there. The reason feminism is such a thing. But I think for in the East, we still have so many things that we go through, and yes, again, a very broad topic. I can go on and on and on talking, and I do not want to do that. But I think that's why, because I wake up and the world is a different world for me. It's a different playground for me. It's a different playground for a man. My game and my strategies are always going to be different than your games and your strategies. So I have to play a different game than a man has to. So I would say a few learnings that I took from my travels is keep your guards up. As women, all the women out there, shout out to all the ladies who are watching this, all the women out there, keep your guards up, But then again, do not let that refrain you from enjoying. Let yourself loose, explore, keep your guards up, and filter information, see what's good for you, see what's not good for you, because you always have a sense. Ladies are born with this kind of sense that we know what's wrong and what's not. So you have to judge it. Be respectful to the cultures, to the people that you're going to go and talk to visit, and always go with the idea that you are a complete fool. You don't know anything, because it's you never really you can't understand their story, you cannot understand their plight. So when you go with the idea of that, I'm a complete fool, I do not understand anything, that's when you open yourself up to the world of stories. When you listen, you imbibe, you absorb, right? And I mean, just a little bit more on this. First, like in Asia, I saw few people being disrespectful, or making fun of the locals in their own languages, probably English, where they do not understand that. They're not going to understand that. They're probably going to laugh with you. But then as a human being, what do you carry in yourself? You went out there to Asia, you had all these experiences, and you were making fun of those people just to make a couple of your friends laugh. No, it's not okay. Because if the other person has empathy, they know what kind of a person you are, and you can't live with that kind of reality of yourself. Secondly, like in Mexico, I was one of those people where I went to a cemetery. I don't know if you guys know about Dia de los Muertos. There's a tradition in Mexico where they celebrate the dead. It's called the Day of the Dead, and the movie Coco was based on that. And you go to the cemeteries, and all the people gather together. They spend the entire night sitting in front of the graves of the elderly or people who have passed away. And they eat, they enjoy. So they celebrate the dead. Instead of mourning, they mourn, yes, but they celebrate as well. Now, because of the movie Coco, this thing has been picked up so much that the tourism in Mexico has increased, I think, many folds. I'm not giving you the numbers because I'm not aware of it myself, but many folds. And the cemetery that I went to, I was squeezed between people. Like every 15, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, or a minute or so is when you'd get to move one step. It was so tightly packed. And then you get to wander, like go around the cemeteries, the graves of people, because that's where the decoration is, the beautiful flowers, the candles, and people dressed up, and you see all of that. But then again, I felt so bad because I was walking among the graves of people where people were sitting and mourning, and the people who were the people of the place, I could see the disdain, the scorn in their eyes and their faces, that we don't like you tourists. Why are you walking on the grave of my grandfather? I don't know. You know what I mean? That's when I felt like, okay, here I am overstepping my boundary as a tourist, where I need to be just respectful. I need to know what to do, what not to do before signing up for anything. So just be mindful. Be mindful of what you're doing, and embrace everything. Please do not for a second think that if you go on a journey of a lifetime, the journey is going to be all rosy and beautiful, and it's going to be amazing. No, as Mauktik shares his story, yes, oxygen masks are going to fall from over the top. Yes, buses are going to change routes. You're probably going to run into an accident. Embrace all of it. Be safe, but you have to enjoy all of it. And at the end, just as one of the greatest people who has ever been alive, Hunter S. Thompson, he said, buy the ticket, take the ride, and decide for yourself. Just go out there and explore. So I would just end my talks here. I know it was unprepared. I know it was all over the place, but that's it. This is all I've got. And for the pictures, to all the people out there who are on Instagram or Facebook during the coming days, now that I've started opening up about my travels, I will share more pictures. So maybe you can go into the Instagram, and I will do this Gen Z thing. Please follow me on the Instagram. Follow me on Instagram, watch out at my Facebook, and this and that. And yes, please, if you want to see pictures, go ahead and follow us. and ahoy, just begin your journey. And over to you, Tanvi.
That was so fascinating. Both of you have incredible storytelling abilities. I feel like just listening to you is so heartwarming. Especially Ankita, I feel like I had so much curiosity about like knowing what you've been through. Because I feel like even Indian cultures don't really, I mean, for women, traveling is still not a thing. And I feel as a fear, especially in defying what life you've been made to choose and then going off and just choosing what you want to do instead. So I want to ask you, I mean, you've already covered that part, but emotionally, how much did you feel you had to prepare for this? Like, did you have to mentally like pressure yourself to like do this, or was it something that you were already, looking forward to doing?
No, I tortured myself for 2 months. That's the answer. I tortured myself for 2 months first because I had a very good on paper job. I was working for the Swiss government. I could have taken it ahead and followed my career, but would I have been happy if I was doing that? No, because I felt I was ignorant fool. I felt like I was not informed. I was reading a lot. I was always doing this, but my idea, I wanted to travel because there was this deep sense of guilt coming from somewhere. I don't know why, but it was just like, I don't know enough. I don't know anything, and I need to be out there to teach myself. So I know as a woman, it's a second layer of pressure that we tend to have, because as a woman, you're supposed to be this perfect lady. Don't do this, don't wear this, don't eat this, don't there are like list of don'ts that you should not
Mm-hmm.
do. So I think yes, you have to question yourself a lot. But you have to go through it all. You have to go through the pain, because had I not questioned myself, and had I not quit my job, I wouldn't have the luxury of time, not money, because I struggled a lot for money. That I wouldn't have the luxury of time to embark on such a long journey, I'd say, because I would always have a commitment or responsibility to come back to. But this kind of step that I took, call it brave, call it foolish, call it whatever would you like to do, but would you like to call it? But it was yeah, it took a lot of thought. It took a lot of preparation emotionally on my side to be able to take such a massive decision. So much so that I had 3 meetings with my boss, and he was the consulate general of like Switzerland in India, and he was like, you know what? If I were your age, and if I had that kind of unrest inside of me, the restlessness, the kind of because I was this kid in the office. Everyone was senior than me. Everyone was more experienced than I was, but I was the one constantly asking questions, bringing up crazy ideas, which are not probably formal enough to be incorporated in such a very serious corporate environment. So he was like, if I had that kind of zeal inside of me, I would not think once. As much as we would love to have you here, or probably he was lying because he wanted to get rid of me. so so he said, if I had that, I would not think twice. So take your time, evaluate your options. But if I were you, I would just go. So yeah. And everything, I think, unfolds. The Yes, lack of planning does bring this unorganized mess that you tend to wander into. But then everything unfolds, because my idea, I bought a one-way ticket to Thailand. I did not buy a return ticket. And my idea was, okay, I'm going to do, Thailand. I'm going to do my scuba diving. I would see the beaches, this and that. And then I will see how it goes. And it so happened that people, while I was traveling in India, a Canadian couple that I met, Cody and Chantel, and they were living in Cambodia. So they moved from Canada, they came to India, they traveled around, they moved to Cambodia, and they started living there. So they invited me. They're like, oh, you're so close by. Why don't you come over? And they were living in Siem Reap, where Angkor Wat, I don't know if you guys, what, the temple is. So they were like, why don't you come over? Because the traveling spirit that you're going to come with, maybe we will also go ahead and see the temples. Because even though they moved to Siem Reap, they never saw the temples, being like 2-3 months within the same city. So they invited me. I went there. We saw the temples, and I was with those guys for like a week or so. And it was so much fun because their Airbnb host was a local Cambodian guy. He had a 4-wheeler, so he took us to these unexplored places that we love to do, because where you would not find tourists there, you would not find regulated queues, you would not have to buy any tickets. So I went ahead and saw these ruins that have been like the trees overgrew on those ruins. And I have some photos, but I don't think we have time for that. um, I saw shivalingas inside the temples, and the guy was like, "Oh, do you want to see scorpions?" And he was like, "Oh," we were like, "Okay, maybe we do." And he just turned over a stone, and we saw like scorpion babies under that stone. So it's kind of like, yeah, it's here. Don't touch it; it'll bite you. It'd probably die, but just don't mess around. But here, scorpions. So it's those things. So I was like, you know what? All the decision of not working and not having a job and not getting money in my account every month, all of that is worth it because I'm able to see these scorpions or these balances. So I don't know. All of it is worth it.
That was
So
wonderful.
yes.
Thank you so much for answering that. Yes. The next question I have for Mauktik. So media always tends to have, they portray this image of travelers having changed after they return traveling. So, they've undergone some drastic change in who they were before they were traveling and who they are as people after they've been traveling. So have you, as someone who's traveled so extensively, have you noticed that in yourself? Or like, is it just a notion that like exists out there?
No. So there's definitely been a lot of changes. You can ask my mom, or you can ask my friends, and they'll tell you all the changes that I've gone through. But I think broadly, I can say there are at least 2, 3 domains where I see a clear difference. Before I started doing this kind of unstructured traveling, I used to focus a lot on what I knew, which was engineering and neuroscience. And that is a natural tendency. I think if you spend, 15, 20, 30 years learning something, you want to stick to that. And whatever job you want to find, you find in that particular area of expertise. But when I started traveling and seeing people doing all kinds of crazy things, I said, hey, I think I can also do a bunch of different things in life.
Mhm.
So that's the reason why when I met Brahmanand Singh, and when he said, look, I can see an interesting movie coming out of it, but you're going to have to do all the running around, which was a huge challenge. I had no background in filmmaking. I didn't even know how the industry worked. So imagine going from that point to 3 months of brainstorming, deciding how we're going to travel, where we're going to travel, where the money is going to come from, logistics. There is an American girl that we're taking to all these small towns and villages of India. And then once the movie is done, how do you reach your audience? How do you do the marketing? How do you do the sales? So I think that was a huge shift in my life where I actually started enjoying this process of taking something from idea stage, no matter what field it is in, bringing a bunch of people together, the right kind of people together, building the team and making things happen. I'm not saying that I made the movie. I think most of the credit goes to the director and the entire team and the crew. But I was also a part of it. So that was a great learning experience. In fact, now I have 5 or 6 more films in the pipeline. So I think that's one thing that I definitely learned out of this. The fact that, again, I'm going from neuroscience all the way to filmmaking is, a testimony to the fact that I've learned a lot out of these kind of travels. The other thing I would say is appreciation for arts. This is something that when I was growing up, I didn't really care much about. I used to read a lot of literature, I grew up reading a lot of Marathi literature, for example, and then switched to some English literature. But when you actually try to create some art, that's when you realize not just the pains, but even the amount of effort it takes to get it out and make it reach its intended audience. So I think when you come from an engineering or a technical or a medical kind of a background, you just don't appreciate that. And I think the pandemic, if it has taught us anything, it has taught us the importance of arts. When you're stuck in your home and you can't meet your friends, you can't meet your family, you can't have these social gatherings, what is keeping you going? It's really the arts. So lots of these kinds of learnings. The third, I would say, is I think I've become sort of a borderline nihilist now, right? You start questioning the meaning of life and why you are here. And Ankita, I have had a few conversations about it, but that's another huge change in perspective in my life, where I was so focused and I think I was a little self-absorbed, right? I used to think that, oh my God, I'm an important cog in this whole wheel. And the moment you step out of that, you realize that even if you disappear tomorrow, everything is gonna keep going on. So I'm still excited about startups. I love neuroscience. I love technology, but I stopped taking myself too seriously these days. So I'll stop there. I know there's lots of questions, and this answer can go on forever.
I can second that.
Yeah.
The questions, if we take them up. Okay, so Ashish Pandey is asking to Ankita, as per you, what are the major opportunity costs of living a life of constant traveler and how you try to trade off that?
I'm sorry, can you say and tell me the question again?
So as per you, what are the major opportunity costs of living a life of constant traveler and how do you trade it off?
The major the costs of living. I'm sorry.
The opportunity cost. So he's using a startup terminology. So what are you losing and what are you gaining?
I got it. Yeah. No, I was just kind of trying to frame the answer in those terms. So first of all, I'm losing a lot and I'm gaining a lot, because there's always a trade-off. You can't imagine a life of luxury, stability, having a proper job, and same set of friends and familiarity. You lose all of it. And what you get in return is adventures, stories, a life well lived in my eyes. Again, everybody has got their own idea of how life should be. I am in no way in position to criticize, or I would never dare do that. People who are chasing their dreams, people who are, looking for a career, a stable life, family. It's different choices that we make in life. And trust me, I have struggled with it myself. Because when I see my friends having stable relationships, having not just with their romantic partner, but with their friends, because your friends are constantly changing as well. When you move, the friends that you see in real life, they also change as well. But then what you get in, I'm sorry, my laptop is running out of battery, so sorry.
Back to the mundane world.
Yeah, exactly. We have to run, we're completely dependent on that. I mean, my job right now is completely dependent on that. If I don't have a laptop, a camera, a speakerphone to speak to, I won't be able to teach the kids that I'm teaching or the adults that I'm teaching. So yes, you trade off all of these things. The most important thing that I feel and I miss every now and then is familiarity, more than stability, more than anything else. I think I miss familiarity. Sometimes you do want to, cower back to the same people. You want to cry in front of someone and be like, complain all you want. I want to do that. But then there is no way, Because if I cry or complain in front of a stranger, I would not get the same inputs because that person does not understands me, right? So this is like a very minute, very little thing I'm telling you. There are multitudes of things out there that I have to trade for. But then what I get in return is adventure, a life well lived. Also, I want to do all of this craziness now when I have the time. I might not have the money. I have the time, rather than, when I've retired and I will have all the money in the world, but I would not have probably the body to climb up, I don't know, 3 hours of hiking and in the cold, freezing and feeling dizzy and sniffing on oils to keep breathing, eucalyptus oils to keep, your nostrils open and stuff like that. I don't think I would be able to go through all of this physical chaos and turmoil when I'll be that old. So I think that's the trade-off. And I'm choosing time over stability and money. So you get to decide. As an adult, you always choose. What do you want? You want adventure and this, or you want stability, time, money? You want adventure, go out there. You're not going to have money. You're going to struggle every day. Every day would be a little adventure, and it becomes a thing. And after a while, you get used to it, and then you find out ways. But then again, I would say multiple opportunities open up as well. Because when you educate yourself, for example, I came to South America, I always wanted to learn Spanish. So I went to Mexico, I wandered around, I was in different states of Mexico. So I've covered almost half of the country, living in different places. And I was there for 6 months. So I was like 1 month in one state, go around, okay, 2 months in another place, like that. Then I went to Peru, where I did a trade-off, where I volunteered for a few hours, and I always wanted to learn horse riding. I mean, I knew how to ride horse, but I never equestrian work. So show jumping and, these kind of special skills. If I had to pay for that, I cannot imagine how much money I'd have to give. So I traded off. I said, fine, I will work a few hours for you and I will help clean the horses, take the poops out of their, hooves and groom them. And then I get to ride the horses and learn equestrian work. So I traded off these things. Now I know how to ride a horse. I'm very comfortable around it. I can even jump half a meter. So, these are the little things that you pick up. And most important of all, now I can speak Spanish. I can hold a conversation in Spanish. My grammar would be probably equivalent to an infant, and I'd be saying bizarre things in past, present, future tenses. But if you talk to me, I can communicate really well, and it takes some time for the person to figure out if I'm an extranjera. That means I am a foreigner or not. So these are the trade-offs you get. You learn a lot in exchange to familiarity, stability, money, and all of that. And don't get me wrong, I am still young, I guess. And I think I can go on and pursue the career that I want to right now, which is going to be writing. And I think things become more clear when you step out and look at everything from a third person's perspective. When you're living the reality yourself, you do not have time. You can't be the character in a movie and tell the story at the same time, design the whole thing. You have to be the director. You need to step out. You need to see the whole thing, the whole project. And then you'd be able to make out different bits and pieces and who fits where and which one of these things do I want to do? Do I want to be a writer? I want to be an actor, a camera person, a light person, a sound guy. Which one of these things am I going to be? So I think, I'm sorry to blabber on and on and on. This would be the answer. You miss out on a lot, familiarity, money, but you gain extraordinary, amazing things as well.
That was beautiful. We have one from Vakaran Vaidya who asks, what are the wildest things you have done while traveling? Which is both of you.
Ankita, you want to go? What is the
things you've done while traveling?
Tanvi, you just got broken off. I couldn't.
Am I audible now?
Now it's okay.
Okay, so the question is, what are the wildest things you've done while traveling?
I cannot tell you that. No, because I will tell you why. wild, I mean, again, it's a matter of perspective. What is wild for me might be like a day-to-day thing for someone else,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
So it's a matter of perspective. But
You
trust
want,
me, the things that Mauktik, sorry, you were saying?
no, I was just gonna say, do you want me to make your life easier? I can take that.
No, I just wanted to say that I would say, I've seen a lot of things that it probably looked like a movie because, you know, if I was a girl who was working in Bangalore, who was going to the office, coming back and having a life, you know, having a proper life, I would never in my life imagine seeing these things in real life. I would never see such human beings. I would not hear such stories. I would not talk to such people and witness some things that I probably would not want anybody to witness. so so I'd say that is that. And the craziest thing I have ever seen. One is that I think it's crazy. It was beautiful. It was the story that I told you about the bioluminescence and the Milky Way. It was like a Life of Pi, the movie. It was kind of like, what the hell? How can this be real? And the other one is, I think, because when you go through that, you know, you attract those things. I was reading a lot of Hunter S. Thompson. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him. He was the father of gonzo journalism. He was a writer, 70s 60s writer from America, and he rode with the Hells Angels, the bike gang. And I was reading a lot of I was really inspired by him, and he talked a lot about the edge and how you should walk on the edge. And you know, it was quite a lot of that going on. So I think I somehow almost had a good interaction with I don't know if I should say this, but like mafias during one of my travels. And the one of the really most amazing and weird things that I remember is like one guy who wrote in, and he had like his face tattooed. His face was tattooed, and he was one of the bike members. He was one of the bike members. It was a bike gang, and his face was tattooed. And the people that I was talking to or interacting with turned out to be notorious ones. And at the end, while I was leaving and waiting for my friend, that guy, I was kind of intimidated and scared by his own persona. He looked at me and he gave me a grin. And that grin said, that grin sent a shiver down my spine, because I was like, oh my God, am I going to get trouble into the, because I'm in such an environment, and because I'm trying too hard to, you know, talk to these people or trying to get things out of them. I was warned to leave places. Because they thought that I'm a journalist, or, you know, I'd get the stories out there or something. I was never a journalist. I was just a writer. I was working on my personal projects. So I was warned, like, I was like, if you do not leave the place, we will make sure that you do. So it's kind of like, it depends. It depends on how you take your travel, where you go. So be careful, but enjoy. Like, take it with a grain of salt. Enjoy. And Mauktik, your answer.
No, I have tons of crazy stories to tell. You know, one of the wildest things I remember is again something that I probably would have died doing. I was in South America. That was my motorcycle trip. And as luck would have it, the last day of my trip, I have about 300 kilometers to go before I get back to Cusco and return the motorcycle and start my Machu Picchu hike. Unfortunately, that last day, within about 50 kilometers or so, my motorcycle broke down. And the engine had apparently seized. I hadn't changed the oil for a long time, blah, blah, blah. So I'm stuck in the middle of nowhere again. And I have to get out of there because I had booked my Machu Picchu hike starting the next day. I initially thought that, I'll find, somebody who can just dump my motorcycle on his, pickup truck or a bigger semi or something like that, and I would get to the next town and figure things out. I waited for about half an hour. Nobody was willing to wait. And then the only person who waited, who stopped, was a guy whose truck was full of all kinds of things. So this was a packed truck, but he was at least willing to stop and help me out. When I saw him, my first reaction was, how the hell are you going to help me? But then he went back to his truck. He pulled out a rope from his truck. And I was like, what are we going to do with this rope now? So he actually starts tying the rope from the back of his truck to the front of my bike. And imagine that was his idea, that he's going to drive his truck. I'm tied to the back, and somehow I'm going to manage to balance this whole circus. The biggest mistake he did, which I didn't even realize, was he tied that rope to only one side of the chassis. So you probably remember that there's two bars that go down the front of the bike. He tied that rope to only one side of, only one of those rods. And he started off. He doesn't speak any English. I don't speak any Spanish. So as soon as he starts, number one, it's a yo-yo, right? He has gone off and I'm just trying to figure out how am I going to keep up with this guy? And the second thing is it starts pulling in one direction, right? Because it's tied to one side of the bike. And man, I think for the first 5 minutes of that ride, I was again in that same situation. I thought I'm either going to fall off or he's going to, the motorcycle is going to tumble and I'm going to get dragged. But luckily, I think after about 5-10 minutes or so, I managed to slowly go to the side, somehow get into his rear view mirror and ask him to stop. So we pulled over, we balanced the bloody thing, and we started again. Because for, I think, 30 or 40 kilometers, I don't even remember, that was the nearest town. And there was nothing else in the middle. Nobody could fix the bike. Nobody could help us. And I had no other way of getting out of that place. So imagine 30 or 40 kilometers of this circus where this guy is riding his truck. I am tied to the back. And, there were a few of these, roadside stalls in the middle. And all those guys, as we were passing by, looking at us and they're wondering what the hell is wrong with these guys. But that's just probably one of the wildest things I've done. It was quite dangerous in hindsight, but I had to do it. There was no way of getting out of that situation other than that. So
amazing. That's amazing. To both the speakers, Tanmay Shaha has a question. Your top ideas for how one can fund and also explore.
Can I take that one?
Okay, sure.
You should, because my travels were very different.
Mauktik, are you sure you want me to take it, or do you want to take it?
No, please do, because my travels, I'd saved some money and done all of my travels out of that. So I think you're the right person to answer that.
Okay. Yes, there are a few ways to fund your travels. And I think with I should not say this, but I will. Thanks to COVID-19, now the entire thing is going to move. The whole work scenario is going to be remote working, right? So first of all, you cannot step out there in the nature, and you cannot be completely off grid. If you have to support yourself, you have to have Wi-Fi or access to internet. And there are other ways. Yes, you can do that as well. Be completely off grid and support your travels at the same time. So now, because I've been in the community for a long time, I would give you guys some pointers on that. The first one is, and now this is what I'm talking about when you do some work in exchange for the experiences. And there's a website called workaway.com. You pay like $40 or so, and they give you the membership for an entire year. And there you could go sign up for it, and depending on if you get to go into that country. So you have to figure out your visa, your travel costs all by yourself. The people who are registered there are business owners and people who would like to help you improve your skills. So for example, the equestrian thing that I did when I worked for the horse club, and I, helped them groom the horses, help the exercise the horses every day, and in exchange, I got the lessons. There are places where they would say, okay, you come here and you work in our hostel for 2 weeks, 1 month, or whatever. You become a receptionist, or whatever skill you've got to offer, you can tell them that. You can work on their website, you can help them with their marketing, or in business development, whatever skill that you have, you can bring on the table. And then in exchange to that, they will give you food, and they will give you a place to stay. So lodging and food. This is one website where you could go and check it out. A second is you can go on the road and do it like I did when I was not aware of it. You just go, and if you feel like, your budget is, you need to stay, you feel like you want to stay in this place for a month and your budget is not supporting it. So you go and you offer your help, and in exchange, people are very much willing to take you on board and help you whatever they can in exchange for your help. Now, secondly, the second point that I would want to put some light on would be if you want to make money and have your career going while you're working. So there are a lot of opportunities, and the space that I work in, like digital nomads, like we call ourselves. So these people are corporate, like people who are working in the corporate world, or who have stepped out of the corporate world, or they're taking the corporate world with them and in their laptops as they go. So there are a couple of other websites and pages that you can check out, which are the portals for these kind of works, where companies would put their job openings over there. You can apply like we do, like we apply for normal jobs, and then you get a job. You can be a marketing manager, you can be a social media coordinator, you can be whatever skill you bring, that's a job you get. But these are the jobs that are completely dependent on you having a good internet and the electronics, whatever's necessary for you, right? So you can't go completely off grid if you are stuck to one of these jobs, because some people take part-time jobs, some people take full-time jobs, some people can work as freelancers. So currently I'm working as an online English teacher because I am certified to be an English teacher, and I've done that in Vietnam. I've done that for quite a while, and for two reasons. One, because the number of hours is like very, very limited, so I don't have to work 8 hours from 9 to 5. I don't have to do that. Second, because I needed time to write, so I wanted to keep my working hours, limited. Yes, that's a compromise in money, because obviously what you offer is what you get paid for. But at the same time, again, choices. You design your life. The best thing about being on the road, or you are in complete control of your life, from the very morning that you get up, to the tea you're making, to the breakfast you're eating, to designing your hours of the day, how you're going to spend them. You want to go watch a movie, you want to go see a lake, go on a hike with your friends, or plan a camping trip for the night. It's completely on you. So yeah. So these are the two categories, I'd say. You trade your time and skills for bedding and food, or you work as a full-time professional, but you need to have internet for that. You cannot go completely off-grid.
That was super insightful. Thank you, Ankita. We have one from Tushar to both of you. It says, is it possible to attain a balance midway between these two choices of stability or adventure?
I think Mauktik is gonna, I'd let Mauktik start. I want to just take care of my throat a little bit.
No, I think it really depends on what you're looking for, right? What do you mean by balance? Ankita, you look at what Ankita has been doing. She's happy with the life she's leading, and I have taken off for long durations. I've done my trips. I've had my travel fix. And I come back and try to find some consulting work or something for a longer duration, and then maybe go back to traveling. So one of the challenges with this question is a lot of times we don't know who we are as travelers. Since we haven't done a lot of traveling by ourselves, we don't know what we enjoy and what we don't enjoy doing. And the initial process, I would say the Mexico trip that I mentioned, it was just 2 weeks when I got exposed to backpacking and people doing unstructured travels. Then I went on to do a 6 week trip, which was my motorcycle trip in South America. And then I slowly expanded to do a year-long trip. And even at the end of the year-long trip, when I finished in Colombia, I had the option to just hitchhike through Central America, right? I'm in Colombia, then you go to Panama, El Salvador, Guatemala, and just come back to the US. But at that point, I felt like, okay, this has been quite a hectic trip. I've seen a lot, I've done a lot, and I don't really feel the need to continue anymore. So for me personally, it has been a slow journey into figuring out what I enjoy, what I don't enjoy in traveling. And I've been generally happy with the balance that I've struck. Now, that being said, if I ever get a chance to do this again, then I would do it the way Ankita is doing it, because I don't want to do, 35, 36 countries in a year. I've done most of the things that I wanted to do. I've seen most of the things that were on my bucket list. So if I ever do this again, I would, want to spend a good month or two in every country, understand the culture better, talk to people, learn a little bit about the history, and then move on. So no frantic pace, and just taking it a little easy. So I would say, to answer that question briefly, I would say you need to figure out first what kind of traveler you are, and then the balance question will come in later. You'll easily find it. It's really not rocket science. Rocket science is what I used to do. This is not.
On that limb, we have a question from Makrand. Is there a place you regret visiting? That is a question he has. So both of you can answer. Both of you can.
None.
Oh,
None.
that's nice.
I do not regret visiting. Sorry, I just want to say one thing though. But I think I went too far, too far. There were places where I'd say if I had to trade and I have a younger sister and a younger brother. So I'd say, oh, would you want your brother and sister? I have thought this before. And I was like, would I want them to go and have the same journey like I did? I probably would not. No, it will be a complete no. Because I think I was too adventurous. So I always delved into dangers and I'm going into places, not just concerning the physical or the geographical aspects of it. It was more, I think humans are more dangerous than anything out there. Nature, geography, animals, anything. Humans are the most dangerous thing you could ever encounter. So I think you need to always evaluate your options there. Just be mindful and very careful of who you're talking to, who you're going on the trips with, what kind of people you're living with, what kind of environment are you living with. But again, if it's for a specific purpose, for me, it was for a specific purpose. I was there because I wanted stories. And I wanted not just stories, it was education. And I knew it's not going to come if I'm going to reside in a protective zone, comfort zone of mine. I'd have to step out and I'd have to do it. If you don't have to do it, if there is no specific purpose for it, please, by all means, have a structured travel, organize yourself, and do that. But if you have to, by all means, go ahead, evaluate your options and go in. Buy the ticket, take the ride, right? Sorry, I just completely got off the question. And I started thinking about all the mistakes that I have committed. Was it about that? Was it that?
Yes.
The mistakes that you've done.
Yeah.
Regretting any place you've gone to. You've been.
Okay, no. Regrets, probably not. Regret is a very strong word.
Yeah.
Mistakes, yes, I would tweak it a little bit here and there. But then again, at the end of the day, it's man, you learn from your mistakes. And the very, very mind-blowing piece of advice that I ever got from someone, or I think I read it somewhere, was you just not have to learn it from your own mistakes. Your life is too short to learn from your own mistakes. You need to learn from others' mistake as well, right? So try to read these books. For example, Mauktik has written the book. So try to read the experiences of other travelers, not to get the idea of how the travel is going to be, but probably just to know things a little bit and know where you need to step in and when you need to take a step back.
Are you trying to say that?
No regrets, zero regrets.
Are you trying to say I made a lot of mistakes?
I'm assuming you did.
No, so I think on that same note, I wouldn't say regret, but in hindsight, I've made a few mistakes, and I can think about one where I was on that motorcycle trip. I came from Cusco all the way down to La Serena. It's on the coast in Chile. And my plan was to go to Santiago, and there is a major highway that goes from Santiago to Cordoba. You can cross over into Argentina from there. But I was fixing my motorcycle, and the mechanic suggested another route, which is something called Paso de Agua Negra, and it translates into the Pass of Black Water. And I wasn't so sure because, again, didn't speak the language, didn't know the people, didn't know the landscapes. So I was a little hesitant, but then he kept telling me, he said, no, no, your bike is fine, you can take that road. And the day before leaving, I ended up in a bar, had a few drinks, got up a little hungover. And I think I started around 5 o'clock in the morning. And this road took me from sea level all the way to 4,800 or 4,900 meters. So imagine it's almost 15,000 feet. That's where the pass was. And then I came back down on the other side. I was riding these crazy roads for about 10 to 11 hours. And in those 10 or 11 hours, I must have crossed 2 or 3 cars. That's it. If I'd gotten stuck somewhere in there, I don't know what would have happened. I don't know if I'd come out of that situation alive. And on top of that, I had never been to altitudes like that. I had already had a few drinks the day before. These are things that you should absolutely not do. And I ended up doing it, came back alive. But the funny part of it is, when you look back at it, I started asking a lot of people on the Argentinian side. And I told them, hey, I took this Paso de Agua Negra. Some of the most beautiful pictures that I have are from that place. And even the locals haven't heard of this road. So it's not one of those fancy paved roads. It's not a nice highway, anything like that. And even the locals don't know much about it. So, when I heard other people question me, like, oh, where is this? How do you get there? Then I was like, okay, it wasn't that bad a mistake. So I'll stop there. Somebody else.
I would like to add on that. Something very similar happened.
We need to mute a couple of people. I think
yeah, I'm on it. Yeah.
Go ahead, Ankita.
Sorry. Yeah.
Go
okay.
on.
Okay. So I'd like to add on that, because I'd say respect the times of the national parks and the areas that have a time limit. So don't be so adventurous like I was. Don't do that. Don't disrespect the fact that, they say that the national park is going to close at 5, and the collectivo, they call it the collectivos in South America, where they're like little minivans that take you out there and you can go for a hike, and then they take you back from where the paved road, or so to say the normal road, starts, because otherwise it's out there in the wilderness. You're on your own. So that one of very certain experiences happened with me many a times, but the most recent one was in Cusco, actually, coincidentally enough. I went for, it was in Huaraz. It was in Peru, but in a different place called Huaraz, and that has beautiful lakes. And to get to the lakes, and these lakes are on top of a mountain range. So to get to the lake, you'd have to hike for 2 hours, 3 hours, like that. And I was warned that, the collectivos are going to come back from that area at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And me being me, I was just like off there exploring and sitting and reading a book next to the lake. And I was like, no, there are some people still here. And there was one group that was camping still. So that's how I was like, even if I end up being stuck here, I know I'm going to go and ask their help, and I can, just manage that. And it so happened that on my way back, I found another solo Canadian dude. He was also hiking by himself. So we came back and we were talking about, I don't know, writing and British comedy and this and that, a lot of things. And we just got lost in this amazing conversation. And we came back like an hour late, and it started raining. And it was all quiet. The police officer who was supposed to be there was not there. The ticket, nobody was there, nobody. And you're left alone in the middle of nowhere. You're just standing, getting drenched in the rain. And where do you go from here? You don't even know the way. The internet is not working because it's completely off grid. You can't find, Google Maps, none of that thing works. Luckily, he had another called maps.me. So he had like vague somehow those terrains that we could take. Another girl came back. She was from Austria, and she said there was just one vehicle there parked. So she said she has friends who are coming back again. So Europeans are like crazy, like I am. They tend to just go out there, So I had like a group of 5 people, and then they were kind enough to drop us off until their guest house, the hostel hotel. But then that was also in the middle of nowhere. So then we had to wait for 2-3 hours there, completely drenched, and it's Huaraz, so the temperatures are below 10 degrees. So then it kind of, I was completely, that was one of the experiences where I was like, I'm drenched. I'm probably going to have like 103, 102 fever, and the next 1 week is going to be on the bed. But don't do like stupid things like these. Just that.
That was actually great listening to. Amazing. Okay, so we have one more question from Neha, who asks, who is the most interesting person you've ever met on a travel? Look at them go, they're just like thinking about it.
You want to go first? Go ahead.
No, I'll let you have that first. That gives me some time to think, because I've met like creatures of different varieties.
Yeah, so just like Ankita said, there are so many crazy characters that I've met on these trips that it's very difficult to pick one. But if I were to pick one, I'll talk about a guy I met in LA, of all the places. This was not on any of my big trips, but this was actually a business trip that I converted into a little bit of a vacation in California. And I was staying in a hostel again. At that point, I'd already started enjoying staying in hostels and meeting random people. So I met this 65-year-old guy. He was in the same dorm that I was in. When I walked in, I wasn't even sure why he was there. I did my thing during the day, went to one of those islands, Channel Islands, which are off the coast of Los Angeles, and came back. And in the night, this guy had a couple of tickets for a magic show. I'm not much of a magic show kind of a guy, but I said, sure, we'd had a good conversation. We started walking down. Then he started telling me his life story. He said that he had studied engineering way back when, I think in the 60s or something. Then worked for one of these big automobile companies, got tired of it, went to the federal government. He said, I'm looking for something interesting to do. So that was the time when the American Federal Reserve, so this is the equivalent of the Reserve Bank of India, they were actually setting up these electronic money exchanges. That was not a thing back then. So, how do you reconcile all the, bank accounts or all the transactions that have happened during the day? And back then it used to be paper-based. So the Federal Reserve was actually setting up these electronic exchanges, the prototypes. So he got involved in that. So he was the guy, he was on the team that set up those electronic exchanges. Then he got tired of it. Then he worked for the CIA a little bit. And then after that, I think the last thing he had done for the government was something called war games. You might have heard of these things where every country plays out different scenarios of, okay, what if such and such country does this today? How do we respond? Do we respond militarily? Do we respond diplomatically? Do we respond economically? How do we handle these kinds of crises? And this must have been 2007 or 2008 when I met this guy. Back then, he told me that the US and China, it's a war between US and China. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And now, 12 years later, we are in kind of a Cold War. It's already an economic and a trade war, and who knows where it's going now. So in 2008, that old guy had told me that this is inevitable. It's going to happen. So too many stories like that, and that's, I would say, for me, that's been the most satisfying thing about traveling. The kinds of people you meet. Oh man, it just opens up your horizons, and you start questioning all your assumptions in life. You meet all these people doing all kinds of crazy things, who've either achieved a lot in life, or they're at least following their dreams, and then you start wondering, what the hell am I doing with my life? And that's been the most satisfying things of these kinds of travels. So over to you, Ankita.
As I said, I think really, I even though I got some time to think about it, I could not really jot it down to one person. I've met so many incredible human beings, and the craziest of crazies you can imagine. Like, you would not even imagine in your wildest dreams. I have literally talked to them. And people who've been working on amazing projects, as also people who've had very crazy life. Like, if you talk to them, you'd be like, oh, this is an eccentric human. Maybe I should maintain distance from that person. But then that person opens up and tells you this kind of like amazing adventure that person's life has been. And then you're like, okay, worth it. Like, you deal with the craziness, and it was all worth it, right? So I think I can say this because I'm not going to name names. One person, and I'm writing a book about the experiences. So all of it is going to eventually go there, and you read about it in detail, because I play an important part in the element of this story as well. But I'm not going to reveal all the details. I'm just going to tell you that one person that I met was he was a mafia. And I won't say which country. I won't say anything. And the most organized, the most clean, the most well sorted out human being, who would probably look like he's a CEO of a company, like the thing he's running. It made me learn whatever conversation we had and whatever we talked about. And after that, it was like, after having this thing, and then we, from common friends, it was like, oh my God, do you know that? And I was, okay, I did not know that, right? And then you go ahead and you tie up those stories together, and you're like, oh my God, now it makes sense. All of the things that he was talking about, now it makes sense. But the learning that I got was, even though he is probably not in the most, the sanest, most, how do you say that? That's a nice job. He's not doing something very good for humanity or anything. But what you learn from even such a foul job or character of a human being is also organization, cleanliness. I don't know, these things you see, which are really surprising. Because when you'd imagine a guy walking in with, I don't know, a cigarette or a rolled joint, and like having, this idea of how a person, but no, it's a completely different picture. That's one. And the second one, which I till today, I think I'm 100% convinced was, and I might be wrong again, because nothing is always true. You know, the actor Christoph Waltz, the guy who was the German dentist in Django Unchained.
Mm-hmm.
Right, the guy who goes on with the chariot with a tooth on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
I was walking past a cafeteria because I used to spend a lot of my time in like cafes, drinking tea and reading stuff. And I had someone call out to me. It was like, "Hey, young lady, you seem very sad and disappointed." And I was like, yes, because I was thinking a lot about, World War II and the atrocities and this and that, because I was in that zone and probably reading that kind of book. So I was thinking about those things. And, you show that off. The vibe around you becomes that. So that person, he was writing a letter. He had postcards on his table. He was eating a lemon cake. And I exquisitely remember what and he was having a coffee and he said, "Why don't you join me?" So I was like, hey, what the hell? Like, I don't have anything else to do. I would just join him. So I sat down in his table and I looked at the postcards and he was writing a letter to someone. And it seemed like he was like people who have had enough experiences in their lives, the way they travel and the way they explore life, it's different. So it's a different style. They have the style around everything that they do. So he was writing this thing and we had amazing conversations. And then I said, "You remind me of one of my favorite actors because you look like him, you talk like him." And he told me he was from Austria. He was from Austria. And the original actor, he's from Austria as well. He did not admit that. He laughed. He's like, ha ha ha, no, it's all, you never know. And he was trying to create this mystery around that. I didn't push on it. Like, I didn't push on asking him if you're the person, but I think he might have been the doppelganger who talks like him, who has that accent in English, or he might have been the real person himself. And we talked because he was from Austria and I was reading about, World War and Germany and everything else. And we talked a great deal. Till date, I'm convinced he was the person. He was Christoph Waltz. And I'm keeping my fingers crossed the day I meet him, if I ever get to do that, I'm going to ask him, "Were you that person?" And if so, then I guess I'll put it out there in my social media or something, because that is like a mysterious puzzle that's still there in my mind and keeps bothering me.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
This is from Prasanna. Curious to know about your experience with goodbyes that are too difficult. Any cities that are enamoring to the point where plans to move on are delayed or cancelled? What about those places made the goodbyes difficult? Thinking so much.
That's a tough one to answer. I mean, there's so many of them, it's hard to pick. You Ankita, you wanna go first or?
So you want to take time with this one?
Difficult goodbyes. No, yeah. Go ahead. Do you have somebody in mind? I have a lot of people in mind, so go ahead. I'll narrow it down to one.
Okay. Tons of people, and with me, I think every place that I go to and every city that I live in, it just becomes part of you. And I always, even though I'm not necessarily a very social person, so I would say I have phases. So like phases when I'm extremely social, and then I have to spend 2 months all by myself with my books and, just in a corner, and people think, oh, this human being is crazy. She's crazy because there she was being so social, and now there she is all by herself. But then again, I think cities, the places themselves become a part of you, and you don't want to leave that. You don't want to not see the same Vietnamese woman put out her stall every day while you're walking to that cafe. You don't want to leave that street. We want to walk because, the sense of familiarity that I was talking about. Like how normally when you have a proper life, you go to job, the people, the street vendors you talk to. I don't know, if you go to the office, you buy a cigarette, you buy chai, you talk to those people. It's the same for me, for us. When we travel for a month, for 2 months, I see the same Vietnamese lady with the soup, and she sells me the soup, and I talk to her, or even though we don't speak the same language, I say hello to her, she says hello to me. And saying goodbye to that human interaction becomes really hard enough. Because I guess when you lose the sense of familiarity, these little, familiarities and these little relations that you form on the go become really, really important for you. So I think the hardest part of this life that I live is this: when you leave the place, and for some reason I always have this idea that I'm never going to come back, because there are so many places. Like Hanoi, I lived there for a month, for a year, and when I was leaving it, it took me 1 month to take the decision. It's like, no, I have to go. I have to go. It's like, because why? Because that in my mind, somewhere I know I'm not going to come back to this place, because there are so many places to see. The world is so big, and unfortunately, or fortunately, we just live for 70 years. So I'm not going to go back to the same city. And that's the most unfortunate and the hardest thing. And I think it's a beautiful question, because the answer is really, really tragic. So over to you, Mauktik.
I yeah, it's hard to pick one honestly, and given the frantic pace of my travels, it's been very difficult to hold on to any one particular relationship or friendship or what have you. And one friendship that I remember starkly is my friendship with a Brazilian guy who I'd met in Cordoba. This was my motorcycle trip. The guy had never been on a motorcycle before. I was traveling solo, and we were going in the same direction. This happens so often in backpacking that you're going the same direction. You'd say, "Hey, sure, let's travel." Now, the challenge in my case was I was on a bike. I had my backpack with me, and there was very little space, for another person. But I was open to it. I said, "Sure, if you want to hop on, I'm traveling alone. It'd be nice to have some company." So this Brazilian guy was essentially my alter ego. I was this guy who had never been to South America, didn't speak Spanish, wasn't very comfortable socializing, had my guard up all the time. And he was from Brazil and, spoke fluent Spanish. And, he could walk into a place and start talking to 10 different people, make friends. Um, and then we ended up traveling for 2 to 3 weeks together. We started from Cordoba, we did San Luis, we did Mendoza, came to Santiago in Chile, then La Serena is where we said goodbye. And I think one of the strangest things about that goodbyes was that we had not really gotten to know each other that well because of the language barrier. The other thing was we were both young, we were in our 20s, we were having fun. Every place we were going, we were partying, we were seeing places, we were experiencing a lot of things, but we weren't really connecting with each other much. And I think that's what I found strange about that bond. That, yeah, I found out a little bit about his place in Brazil, the place he grew up in and what he's done in life. But beyond that, what kind of a person is he? If you're stuck, would he really help me out? None of that. There was no real strong friendship there. But the day we said goodbye, I was like, man, now I'm back to traveling solo again. And it was very difficult for me and for him to say goodbye too, because he'd never been on a motorcycle. He had never even imagined doing that. He actually bought a helmet the day he decided to travel with me, because I told him we'll get caught and we'll have to pay bribes or whatever. So I think he also had an interesting ride. I also got to know somebody who was local. We got to travel together without really connecting, but yet there is a certain bond that you create when you travel with somebody in an unknown land. And funnily enough, we said goodbye, thinking that we're never going to meet again in life. Now, what are the chances? Imagine I'm doing this motorcycle trip that I'd never imagined doing. I came back to the US thinking that I'm never going to travel like that again. And this guy went back to a small little town in Brazil. It's, if you go to that town, again, less than 500 people, I would say. Small little village. So, what are the chances of us meeting again? But sure enough, we did. So, when I started my around the world trip, we coordinated in Europe. He happened to be in the UK at that point. He was learning English. He finished that course, met me in Venice. So we had a great time in Venice, and it was a round the world trip. So when I went to Brazil, I went to his hometown and met his entire family. And then after the round the world trip, I went back again for the World Cup in Brazil, and then again spent a few nights with him. So it was just funny how life works, right? Do you imagine that this is your final goodbye, and you never know, you might end up meeting again. So
And just to add to that as well, I think there are certain bonds that you form with people and the friendship continues. For example, my scuba diving instructors in Mexico, thanks to social media, you add them on Facebook and whatnot. Because we talked about the ocean and pollution and climate change and all of these things so much. Like, I'm still connected to all of them. Also, certain people that I met on the road, and one of them is like very good friend of mine. She's pursuing nursing in Germany right now. We now have Zoom calls like this because I think women tend to not hold on to female friendships. It's very difficult to form that kind of meaningful bond because we are different. We talk about boys, we talk about life, we talk about so many things, and life is too short. So it's difficult to form those like really connecting bonds where you match frequencies, as we call it, it matches. So with me and her, it like really, really hit it off. And I'm really good friends with her, not just her, like artists that I've met in Cambodia. I still am in touch with those people. And every once in a while, like in 6 months, a year or so, we would just have a Skype call like this and catch up on, okay, what's going on in your life? Oh, this is what is going on in my life. So the most beautiful thing, and again, I find this question really, really amazing, is goodbyes, because it brings sadness and this eternal friendship together with it. So yeah, sorry, over to you, Tanvi.
That was beautiful. Thank you for answering that. Feel like, yes. The last question is very relevant. This is where do you go from here next? It's a very wide question, but
where do you go from here, Ankita?
Madagascar, probably.
No,
because I wanted to go. So I wanted to go to Cuba because I was reading and I watched a lot of things about Cuban Revolution, Cuba Libre, and I was reading and I was watching Motorcycle Diaries, doing all of my revision on Cuban history. So Cuba was the place that I wanted to go to, but I don't know if due to COVID-19, I'd be able to go there. So answering this question in two parts: one, physically go somewhere, and then metaphorically take my life ahead, right? So it would be Cuba. And the second place that I always wanted to go to, because I wanted to dive in the African place. So I wanted to dive in those oceans. So there was this dive shop that I contacted, and they said I could go and do an internship and further my diving education. So I'm an advanced certified scuba diver now, and I could go on to pursue rescue and become a dive master and so on and so forth. So Madagascar is where I really, really wanted to go, because I was fascinated by Africa, the culture, the people, because I feel like they're very similar to us. They're very, they celebrate, they dance, they sing, they're very similar to us. So I think that would be, these two places are their actual places, geographical locations that I would like to go to. And where would I take my life from here? I think I would, I've already started writing, so I'm going to pursue that very seriously. And I'm working on a script that I hope I could pitch it to production houses, and further, if something, materializes from that, then that is going to be, now it might seem like a cliche that, oh, all of these travelers, they go on a trip and they become writers and filmmakers. Because I guess this urge of, storytelling, it's never really taught in school. And it becomes a part of you, because when you witness so many stories yourself, you feel like, there's this responsibility now, this that you carry on your shoulders, that you have to. And I think with me, because I come from a conservative, such a background, and very academically pushed, so it was always like, I wanted to study, let's say, I wanted to be a fighter pilot when I was a kid. But then Indian Air Force back in those days did not have female fighter pilots. So they said, you cannot fly fighter jets. You can only fly helicopters and cargo planes. And I was like, fuck that shit. I'm not I'm not flying. I didn't want to be a fighter pilot to not fly MiG-21s and Sukhois. I don't want to fly a helicopter. Fuck that shit. And then I changed it to being, I wanted to be a writer, or I wanted to pursue this. But unfortunately, I had good grades. Unfortunately, I was good in math and sciences. So I was, forced. If you're not a doctor, engineer, or lawyer, what the hell are you in your life? Right? So you're forced in that direction. So now, I guess, when I have full control of my thoughts, my life, and I know how to navigate my out there in the world monetarily, also financially control things, now I think it's the time where I could be, you know what, I'm going to put my foot down and be like, this is what I want to pursue, because that is my calling, so to say. It might change again. This is the most important thing about travelers. It familiarizes you with change so much that becomes the only constant in life. Change, the only constant, right? But then for now, that is the plan. So I'm working on a book, writing a script, and so basically pursuing writing and eventually filmmaking, if I get to do that. Fingers crossed.
That sounds wonderful.
Thank you. Mauktik.
So I'm just further along in that journey, right? We were talking about this the other day. I would agree with Ankita that when you experience so much and meet so many crazy people in the world, it's an urge that you want to share all these experiences, you want to share all these thoughts with people around you. So that's how I became a writer. I had never imagined writing 2 books. I mean, one maybe when I was growing up, I thought, yeah, I'll end up writing 1 book. But I'd never imagined writing 2. I had never imagined making a movie, which is another form of storytelling, right? So yeah, I see myself slowly moving towards filmmaking. I still love neuroscience a lot. I still love technology a lot. And I keep drawing a lot of lessons from neuroscience into my daily life. For example, one of my biggest challenges when traveling was not knowing what's coming next. And that's because our brains are wired to look for patterns. When you're looking around in the world, you want to have certain patterns in life so that life becomes predictable. And if you go back to evolution, then that all of that makes sense. And you have to get out of that mode of constantly looking for patterns to actually experience the world. And when you do that, you become a writer and you become a storyteller. So that I think will continue. A little bit of neuroscience, I'm pretty sure will continue. But who knows? When Ankita said that when I have my life together, I laughed a little. Because I know that's never going to happen. That ship has sailed.
Yeah.
You're always going to be in this mode. You'll constantly keep questioning your assumptions and constantly keep trying out new things. You'll be open to new experiences. So writing and filmmaking for sure. Rest. Let's see how it goes.
That was amazing. We have one last question for you. Do you find that you have to settle for things in life that aren't as interesting or challenging as those experiences that your travels have afforded? So do you settle for like lesser experiences?
Well, you should go for that.
I will, but I want to hear your answer.
Do you travel? Do you settle for anything less? Oh man.
Would you in future settle down for anything less that your travels had?
But do you find yourself doing that right now, as in like in the present tense?
Okay.
Whether I'm settling for anything less? I don't think so. Do I look like I'm settling? So right now, just to fill you up on what is going on. When I was finishing that documentary, I was on my second round of crowdfunding, and a few people in my network found out about that project, and then they also found out about that first book that I'd written. And this is how life comes full circle in some ways. These were all wealthy individuals. They found out about the book and they said, "Hey, you already have an interesting story to tell. You've already published it in a book format. So why are you bothering with this documentary where financial recovery becomes an issue? Da 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 da. So let's focus on making a movie based on that book." So I started that project about 4 or 5 years ago. I said, if you guys are willing to write the checks, sure, why not? So set up my own production company. This was supposed to be a small little project, probably $500,000 to $1 million kind of a budget, an independent film maybe. Now we have co-producers from Paris. We have a co-producer from LA. That script has gone through 13 or 14 drafts. We've already done a couple of recce trips to South America, and hopefully it's going to be done by sometime next year. So there were multiple points in this journey where I could have settled for something less. I could have said, hey, I don't know much about filmmaking, so why not just go with what I have and the investors that have already committed and just get this thing done. But then when you've gone through so much uncertainty and when you've gone through so many crazy experiences, the journey itself becomes the excitement more than the destination. I know it's a cliche, but you're willing to see where things go, right? And that's exactly been the journey of this project. So this project will hopefully be done by sometime next year. And as I said, I have 4 or 5 more scripts that I'm working on, ideas that I'm working on. So if I wanted to settle, I would have done that 15 years ago. It's not happening now.
Yeah.
So over to you.
Settling down, I think, first of all, it depends on what do you call as settling down. What is less?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
What is less? Jumping off of a plane or going on a hike, if that is what you're comparing to going to work on your projects or going to the office or trying to meet a target, it depends. What is less for who, right? My idea of having a good life, which actually got defined after I traveled, and now that I look back and I know what I want in life. Earlier, I think before this, I was surrounded by so much white noise that things were not clear. And solo travel gives you the time, because you're on your own, because you're by yourself so much, that you can look back and decide, oh, these were the elements that were not quite fit into what my idea of life should be. And maybe I need to pick these out, like weed them out, right? And then you need to have a general idea of how your life is going to be. And once you've tasted these adventures, you somehow figure out a way to bring these elements into that particular idea of how your life has to be, and then you keep living those adventures. So settling down is never going to happen, ever. So that's one answer. And also, I'd say no one should do that. Even if you're having a proper life, like you're having a job, you're having a family to take care of, you have to go to work, and don't think that we're weirdos. We also have the same thing. We get up in the morning. I get up in the morning. I have my breakfast. I make my tea. I do my job. So if that is the thing that you're comparing to, this is not settling down. Like you have chosen a different kind of life. I have chosen a different kind of life. But you should not limit yourself. Once you achieve your goal, you always aspire for something more. Once you've jumped from once you've done a bungee jumping from a mountaintop, you would want it to go, okay, fine, now I want to jump off of an airplane. I want to go do skydiving, right? Once you've climbed a mountain of not that high altitude, then you're gonna be like, you know what, I'm gonna prepare myself, probably do Kilimanjaro, then probably do Kanchenjunga, maybe then do. You keep going, you keep going, and if you don't like it, you leave it and you pursue something else. So there are so many things, and given the technology and globalization and everything else, we are well informed. We have everything we need. We just need to know how to pursue that. And that's it. So there is no question of settling down in whatever sense whatsoever. It's not there. And I've met people who are like couples who have kids, and they homeschool their kids while they travel. So they do live from different one city to another, and they've got communities where, you know, they identify with, but they like change. So they move with their kids and they homeschool their kids. So it's not like family or settling down or all of these things are not on paper. Of course, I intend to have all of it, but it will unfold itself like life has, right? Eventually, everything will come along. It's no rigidity, no rigid plans.
That was amazing. It may bring us to an end of this session, sadly, because it's been such a great experience having you two on board. So much to learn, especially I think you've experienced so much, and like listening to that firsthand was so insightful. But also I feel like all of us who have some travel like lust in us will want to do it like more now, because I feel like having that in you is one part of it, but actively working on it is like, I think, requires so much courage, which you've done, which you've worked on. And I think that was a lot to learn from. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for joining us today and answering those questions so beautifully. We're looking forward to your Instagram, Ankita. Mauktik is also on Instagram now after a long time.
Finally.
Finally. So you can go follow both of them now, because they have amazing work that they've been putting out too. And you can also buy Mauktik's books, two of his books on Amazon. They're amazing books, great visual imagery, and like just I think both of them, like obviously we've seen that right now, but I think being able to tell these stories so beautifully is also a skill that you have. And it was great listening to that, like so personally.
So I would actually like to thank Tanvi for making this happen, because we've been talking about this for the longest time, and I have become so lazy and indifferent about social media that my first instinct to do anything online is maybe not. So Tanvi has been pushing me a lot to do this. Glad this happened. She has also written a book at a very young age. If you get a chance, you should read that as well. I wish I knew that I enjoyed writing when I was her age. Unfortunately, I didn't. It took me a long time to figure out that yes, I enjoy doing that. So great. Thanks a lot for.
Thank you so much. We
Thank
hope we
you.
can do this more often, because I feel like these stories have to reach the public more often. It's I think it's a lot of like, it's a breath of fresh air to listen to so many diverse stories and to listen to these perspectives, because it's like sitting in our homes. I feel like we're slowly losing touch of like the outer world, and it can feel a little, I think, weird to not be able to go out. And like I feel like in the next couple of months we might not go out as much as we used to before. So this was extremely amazing to. Yes, Ankita.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. No, you can still go out there. Go out on a hike by yourself. You don't have to be in touch with a human. You
Yeah.
have to be in touch with nature. Right?
Yes.
You could just go out there, go on a hike, explore things. And yes, on that note, thank you so much, Tanvi. It was very lovely to meet you finally. And I've also gone through your pictures and I've seen the poems that you've written, some of the posts that you've put out. It's really, really nice. So
Thank you so much.
yeah.
This
And
is like peak validation.
no. I'm nobody. I'm a nobody, right? I'm a fool. That's the learning.
No.
I'm a fool.
Thank you
And
so much
thank you.
for doing this. Yes.
No, thank you, Mauktik, for getting me on board with this, because he knows very well how shy I am with these things. The reason that I've taken longest amount of time to write the book, it's been like 4 years since I've been on and off. So it's hopefully it's going to be finished. I don't know when, but
Looking forward to
before
it.
I die. And thank you everyone for joining and listening to our boring stories. And I hope we can, we should do this more often. Share stories, so I get to relive those moments, and I'm sure Mauktik, you got to relive those moments as well, right?
Absolutely.
So
Sounds
just for
good.
the sake of reliving those moments and sharing this with everyone, and I don't know, trying to educate or probably share whatever we have learned on the road, and as much as I would love to, please go ahead and you can send me questions if you guys would like. I might not answer it right away because I'm a very odd human being. I smile and I look normal, but I'm not very normal. I'm a very odd human being. So yes, but I will answer those questions. And again, thank you, Tanvi. Mwah. Thank you so much.
Thank you everybody for joining. It was amazing having you guys here. And we'll see you soon, definitely.
All right.
Yes. Bye.
Bye.